Good morning, folks. And it is a chilly one today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, by goodness me. But there you are. We have something interesting for you today. Our friend Angela has produced a title which is Being Sinister and the Trouble It Caused. Angela.
Okay, right. So I propose spending about 30 minutes talking and explaining my title, and then seeking your views. So I'm going to explain, obviously. Well, let me start at the beginning. I was born in the olden days, in April 1939. When you look back at that time, it is a different world. I was born in Collier's Wood, Hardy Road, the same little terraced house that my dad was born in 1917. And I was all set to be a Londoner, like my nan, my grandma. And in September 1939, war was declared and life changed. It was horrendous. Apparently, there was me, baby me, 6 months old. Everyone in the street apparently went down to Collier's Wood underground station in fear and trembling because they thought that air raids would be at night. Yeah. So my mum said, "You screamed all night and slept all day," which I can imagine in Collier's Wood underground station with babies screaming their head off. Can you imagine the fear, the absolute fear that...
Bye-bye, all the best.
And then, so my dad was a toolmaker. He was in a protected industry working for Hawkers, the aircraft people. So he didn't technically have to join up. But after about, I think, about a year or so, you know, this routine of going to Collier's Wood underground station, I imagine with my family, it got a bit much. So my dad made a decision that he would find a way of joining up, and his mum, would go down to Kent and live with my mum's family. So in about 1941, my dad joined the Remy. He went to Burma, and we moved to Bromley Green Road, Upper Rucking near Ashford, Kent. Do not get the idea. This was a Norman church and a vicar and a this and a that. No, it was a road. Nanny worked at Ordnance Survey making tents for the war effort, and she had to walk about a mile to the end of the road when I think she would have been picked up with other workers in a lorry. One night I remember being told no torch, of course. You were not allowed to use lights in wartime outside. You had to have blackout curtains so the Germans could not see there were houses. She was attacked by some geese that pecked her leg, but she was pretty strong lady, a pretty strong lady. So in 1942, my dad, who was in Burma, caught malaria and nearly died, and he came back. So in 1943, of course, inevitably, my sister was born. So, and I had, in 1949, I had a brother who had Down syndrome, and in 1959, I had a brother. Now, my two brothers are right-handed. I and my sisters are left-handed, and this is partly what this talk is about. It's being left-handed, one of the 10% of humans that uses the left hand for preference rather than the right hand. About 90% of humans, apparently, whatever society you look at, 90% of humans use their right hand. I'm in a minority, and we'll come to why it's sinister in a minute. So 1944, I'm 5, I go to Auset County Primary School. The Romans do come into it now, because the Romans dredged the Romney marshes, and there were dikes, and there was land rather than sea. So I learnt to write. My dad's at home, remember, and I showed my writing to my dad, and my dad said, "It's lovely writing. All you need is a mirror to read it." So I don't know whether you can see, but actually it is a mirror. So I had written my name as Angela, but the one at the bottom where the spot is actually the mirror writing, because this, by showing it to you, but in actual fact, if I'm looking at it, it goes from right to left. My name is Angela. And that's what left-handed people do. And when I became an infant teacher, I used to put a little red spot where the children had to start writing, because it's not obvious, particularly if you're teaching children who may never have seen a book, who certainly, if they'd had a story read to them, it's not obvious where you start. What is the picture? What's the letter? So I'd done mirror writing because I'm left-handed. And I never thought that that was a bad thing. It was just something. My sister's left-handed, I'm left-handed. Some people are left-handed. At the weekend, my walking group went to the Muller Museum to look at the amazing work that Muller did with orphans. And there was an old-fashioned wooden desk, and the inkwells, it's for 2 children to sit together. And the inkwells, of course, are on the right-hand side. So this explains some of the difficulties I had with writing, because it's pen and ink, and I had to lean over to get at the ink. And I can remember having a present of a Conway Stewart ink pen with left-handed nibs. So that was fine. And remember, left-handed people in many countries, for example, still talking about last weekend, Sunday the 7th of January, there was a wildlife program based on a cameraman who'd done amazing work with wild gorillas in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And he had this amazing camera, and he was making notes. And I always notice, I thought this guy's left-handed. And at one point, his hero was his granddad. At one point, he looked straight at the camera. He said, "My granddad put his hands on my left hand, I presume to bless him, and said, 'Don't use this hand.'" And the cameraman said, "I never thought I would actually ever amount to anything," because he lost his left hand. And I think that is typical, with some people. It wasn't me and wasn't my sister. We were just left-handed, and we were left-handed because we were left-handed. Some of the theories about left-handed, why is it that some people are born left-handed? You have, it's about identical twins. If you have an egg that is fertilized and then splits, I mean, if you're a scientist, please cringe, because I'm not explaining it probably very, very well. But if you have an egg that is fertilized and splits so that 2 babies are born, they will be identical twins. They will be mirror images of each other. And it's quite likely that one will be left-handed and one will be right-handed. If 2 eggs are fertilized, You could have, my niece in America has a boy-girl twin. They're not identical at all, and I don't know whether they're right or left-handed. So the theory about a left-hander being born, which cannot be proved, I don't think, is an egg is fertilized, it splits, and for some reason, only the fetus that is going to be left-handed is born. Who knows? Who knows? But that's, you know, being left-handed and doing everything with my left hand means I'm interested in topics such as that. So in 1950, I passed the 11 plus and I attend Ashford Grammar School for girls, a state school, obviously. I learned French, and the word for right is droit, the law. Everything good is about that word. And the word in French for left is gauche. Now, if you think of the word as it enters the English language, it means awkward, clumsy, a bit negative. And a left-handed compliment, don't forget, is actually an insult. So there's bad things, negative things about built into the language, you could argue, about being left-handed. So I learned Latin. And of course, this is where sinister comes in, because the Latin word for left is sinistra. And my goodness, looking up the shorter English dictionary, the meaning of sinister as it came into the English language. Listen to this. Information given with the intent to deceive, mislead, prompted by malice to deceive, of opinions prejudicial, unfavorable, darkly suspicious. This is all from the Oxford Shorter English Dictionary. In pantomime, for example, goodies enter from stage right. Of course they will, they're goodies. And baddies enter from stage left. And the left, in some Christianity, I think, signifies hell and all things wicked, it's asserted. And the right, sitting on the right hand of God, signifies heaven and all things good. Though I've missed a bit. I'm left-handed, and one of the things I had to do in primary school was to learn to knit. And I had great difficulty. I am wearing what I knitted in 1966 because following the war, there was make do and mend. You made things last. So, but I had this orange wool. And I think because the 12 times table was really important in the olden days, I think we had to cast on 12 stitches and then knit 12 rows. And I had terrible time with this. My nan taught us to read before we went to school. And it wasn't until I looked at the back of my mum's knitting book, which had knitting patterns, and there was the continental method of knitting. And I taught myself that. And I'm away. There you go. That orange piece of hideousness got thrown away, I think. So, yeah, still going okay. So in 1960, I got married. My husband was a chef. I was a secretary. His sister, like my mum, had been a nurse. And his sister was left-handed and still going with the left-handed thing. My sister-in-law, she's in her 90s now. She had 4 children, boy, boy, girl, boy. And of the 4 of them, the girl is left-handed. And I think I'm not sure about this. I think one of her sons or daughters is left-handed. I'm not very sure about that. I think the point I'm making is 10% of humans are left-handed. But in my family, it does seem to be maybe more. And when I talked to my mum about it, she said, well, left-handedness seems to run in some families. And certainly the interesting thing with my father-in-law, my husband, my first husband is right-handed. But my father-in-law, I remember sitting on the beach with him and my husband, and they were skimming stones. There was nobody else on the beach, and they were skimming stones, making the stones bounce on the waves, and they were very competitive about it. My father-in-law is left-handed, was left-handed, so lots of left-handedness in my family, and that I'm always intrigued to know, you know, how much left-handedness there might be in friends' families. So in 1962, we went to New York. We had our green card. Yes, Prime Minister, and we always paid our taxes. Can't resist that. Because we were saving for a deposit for a house. What we did, whatever my husband earned, we lived on. Whatever I earned, we saved. We put into a savings account. And we'd learnt a lot of our friends were going, you could go to Australia for £10, work there for 3 years, save enough money to come back and hopefully to have a deposit for a house. And the same with Canada, the same with New Zealand. But we decided we'd go to New York just simply because we could. And we learned that you could earn $100 a week as a chef or $100 a week as a secretary. And we worked out that if we stayed there about 3 years, we would have that precious deposit for a house. And that definitely, left-handedness didn't come into it then. I was a secretary doing shorthand and typing, and we were absolutely determined to get this money, because at some point after the war ended, we had rented a property in Bromley Green Road. We were then homeless. When I passed the 11 plus, I was living in hut 506, Hoffield Common, near Ashford, Kent. It was a Nissen hut. And certainly the bank manager's daughter, who actually wasn't doing as well as I was good at school, really thought I was some sort of inferior species of human being because I was living in hut 506. I'm not kidding you. Occasionally we sang hymn 506 and I would be sick that day. Just, you know, I just felt everybody was looking at me. The prejudice, you know, class, I suppose it was, that I experienced was absolutely horrendous. So I had no thoughts then of being a teacher. But we returned to London. We bought a house with a mortgage in Sidcup, Kent. In 1965, my first daughter was born. She's right-handed. Her father-in-law, no, her mother-in-law is actually left-handed, definitely. My daughter, who was born in 1967, she's been married twice. She has one daughter. Her, the second time she married, it was wonderful. She's the Quaker in the family. She and her wife were married in this absolutely beautiful Quaker meeting house outside Leeds. Absolutely beautiful. So they're wife and wife. And I asked my daughter-in-law, you know, is there left-handedness in your family? And she said, yes, my mom was left-handed, but she was trained to be right-handed. And I thought, this is something that does happen. You're not allowed to be left-handed because you're different. And certainly some painters, I think it's Van Gogh and Leonardo da Vinci, I think, was a total genius, and I think he was totally ambidextrous. But I think some painters are taught to write with their right hand, but they're they paint. Van Gogh particularly paints with his left hand. So, you know, when you're allowed to use your left hand, it can be quite different. So I trained to be an infant teacher when my daughters were growing up. And I, by the time my daughters, because it was no good being a secretary, we wouldn't have enough money. I didn't think we'd have enough money, and my marriage was a bit creaky by then. I thought I needed to work, and working in an office wasn't going to work, wasn't going to be feasible, because what do you do in the summer holidays and the other holidays? So I trained to be an infant teacher, and started work in 1974 with the Inner London Education Authority, and it was wonderful. My class teaching career was absolutely wonderful, and there were all sorts of guidance for examples, looking up for problem. Look, you can see this is a book of handwriting. Hang on, I mislaid it. No matter. This is a book of guidance for teachers, primary school teachers, about handwriting, and it gives guidance for problems and difficulties. And of course, one of the things left-handers have is difficulty. I will get it in a minute. Yeah, there's some looking out for problems, and it does actually, you know, your responsibility as a reception teacher is to ensure that the children have a good grip with the pen. I remember, this is an aside, but I remember President Obama was left-handed, and I remember seeing him sign a treaty and thinking, oh my goodness me, his teacher did not have the ideas for handwriting that I had as a reception teacher, because his handwriting, his stance was very uncomfortable. If you're doing a lot of writing, you know, and you're left-handed, you tip the page so that your hand is going this way, not that way. It's very tiring. And I wouldn't have got anywhere passing exams if I didn't know that I had to tip the page to write this way. And certainly if I'd been like my daughter-in-law's mum, if I had been forced to use my right hand, I don't think I would have ever passed an exam. It would have been too difficult. Then I certainly, when I trained, it was very much, there was a shortage of infant teachers. And I think it was Harold Wilson's government who made provision that to encourage married women with children, that there would be evening classes. Certainly there were in London, there were evening classes for, and we had a season ticket to go, or money to go for our train ticket. And it was only when my daughters started in junior school that I actually became an infant teacher. So I was completely not their mother and their teacher, if you like. I was teaching younger children, and it did seem to me that was important. So let's go to the bias against left-handed. Now, some machinery, you do have to be right-handed to use it. It would be dangerous for a left-handed person to use. My dad was an engineer and a tool maker, and he would always say, you know, you can't, until you can't, you know, if you're left-handed, you wouldn't be able to use that tool. But there were some tools that I needed. For example, there weren't charity shops. I made all my daughter's clothes, and there was a left-handed shop in Covent Garden, and I bought left-handed scissors, and they certainly made dressmaking, making clothes easier. And also, before tins, you had a pull lid. I had to have a left-handed tin opener, otherwise I was all over the place. So I was born Angela Valentine, and I was very intrigued. I looked online for articles about left-handedness, and I came across this article called "The Long History of Left-Handed Persecution," and it was by someone called Nicole Valentine. And I thought that's an interesting, an interesting coincidence. And this paper suggested that even with the Anglo-Saxon word lift, that meant weak or broken. But the Celtic language, the left hand and right hand were complementary. I don't speak, I shall have to, my daughter and her wife are learning Welsh because they live in Swansea. I shall have to ask them about the Celtic language. But the Chinese, the yin and yang, again, for Chinese philosophy, yin and yang, I don't know a lot about it, but I have taught quite a bit in Guangzhou. They, in 700 BC, the Chinese published the Book of Changes, where they claimed that yin and yang were complementary parts of humanness. So there is a left, there is a right. And now we're nearly there. 2004, I am married to, it's my pourquoi pas marriage. I worked and lived in Botswana for 3 years, and then I traveled back. I had a flight back, and I could pay myself for stopovers. So I stopped over in Senegal. I've long divorced, and they have really good tours. There was one called Les Esclaves, the slaves. You went out on a boat and you looked through the porthole and you saw the land disappearing. And you saw it was the point of no return. And my second husband was the tour guide, who was organizing. He's right-handed, but his brother is left-handed. So it was pourquoi pas. I got on well with him, and he invited me to meet his friends. This has nothing to do with left-handedness, but it amused me. So he introduced me. This is the woman I'm going to marry. So I call it my pourquoi pas marriage. I thought he was joking. So I sort of, pourquoi pas? We got on well. So we did. So in about 2005, when the family learned that I'd been a head teacher, they wanted me to visit the very traditional part of Senegal, which is Casamance. The colonizing French and English carved up West Africa with not taking any interest in, the languages spoken. So the French had showed more respect than the English. So the two bits of Senegal are divided by the Gambia and the Gambian River. So I flew into Banjul, and then my brother-in-law, Tefa, was going to meet me. And David, I'm okay. My brother-in-law, who's left-handed, was going to meet me, and there was an independence struggle, which I understood was over. But as we walked, my brother-in-law, Tefa, and I walked towards the boat that we needed to catch. He was explaining to me, he said, there were soldiers on either side of this road, this lane, really scary because they had great big guns. And Tefa was saying, we spoke French, he said, don't tell them you're English, you don't speak, I will speak for you, I will say whatever has to be said. And by the way, when you get to, my relatives, you are not allowed to use your left hand to eat. It will offend them. So there's me, very left-handed person with nothing much to do. What they did, they grew, I think it was buckwheat, and they exported that. They imported sacks of rice to eat. And the women every morning would sort this rice out to make sure there were no stones. And I had nothing to do, so I asked if I could help. And I had to sit on my left hand to stop myself using my left hand to sort this rice. And you imagine sorting grains of rice out, getting rid of it was a total nightmare. I realized how difficult, you know, if you're a left-handed person and you are forced to use your right hand, how difficult life would have been for me had I been forced. But I did have, and eating, again, I had to sit on my hand and eat with my right hand. It was incredible, incredibly difficult. It was a nightmare. So that's my half hour. I'm a teacher, I'm good at timing. So I'm going to shut up and hope to hear what you think of being sinister, whether there's anyone in your family who's sinister. Okay? So I'm going to
I have been enthralled, Angela. So many questions. I should have written them down, so I don't know if I will remember them all. But particularly interested in what must be quite a high percentage of left-handedness in a family. So, have you looked into this at all? I mean, do you know what the background? How likely it is that there are other characteristics present in a family which might be connected to the left hand? Like, for example, are you more likely to be a surgeon, or are you more likely to be a painter?
I think maybe someone like Hattie with a science background would explain that better than me, because there are evidence. I just don't have that. I can't offer. Certainly, you know, the left side of the brain is more. I really can't answer that question intelligently, but there are certainly questions to raise.
You there, Hattie? I think she's.
No, she's busy. Oh, Mary.
Apparently not.
I've had nearly 90 years of being left-handed, and I've never sat through such an emotional half an hour.
Oh dear.
Oh my goodness. There's so many uncomfortable memories, I think, that you evoked, Angela. The fact that when you're writing as a left-hander, and in the old days you'd had a copy to copy letters, so you covered your letters for a start. I could go on and on. I think above all that we have to sort of rearrange our environment continually. For instance, saucepans will have a right-handed bias. You mentioned scissors. Almost everything has a right-handed bias.
Marianne.
And of course,
I just keep thinking that must have such a huge effect on not just how you do things, but how you see things. And
can we get people who have put their hand up? Marianne, you were speaking.
Sorry.
Okay. The two things that I wanted to say or bring up. One is that of course it's only European languages that go from left to right. Arabic, and I think a good load of other ones go from right to left. And so if 90% of people are right-handed, then they will all have difficulty writing Arabic. But I wondered if whoever started writing Arabic, whether they were left-handed.
And I just answer that because I did a lot of teaching in Jordan, and It was master's level education students, and I made that point. And my students were wonderful because they were middle management people. One of them was going to buy, her family were going to build a kindergarten based on, you know, what I was suggesting. And they went in, I said, well, if there's a left-handed child, do you make them right-handed? But if it was something that really interested them, it was their course. They went into Arabic. They said, yes, Angela, basically there is, but it's too complicated to explain. So yes, you've got a really important point. And it's certainly left-handers do things differently, but I would have thought that Arabic would, you know, be an advantage for left-handers, but they said there were some differences. So it's a brilliant point.
The other
Right.
thing I was going to say was that I've sort of done various bits of stuff in Africa, and you know, have been told many times, although trying to remember it was kind of, you know, I would quite often do things with the wrong hand, but you know, that I was supposed to eat with my right hand and use the left hand for
Casamance, West Africa. Yeah, Casamance is in West Africa. Yeah, I think it's, yeah. Sorry, I'm butting in. And
I don't know what they do with left-handed people, whether they just have to learn that you eat with your right hand and you do your toilet with your left hand.
Well, I'm left a bit out, but apparently in the Middle Ages, you know, when a lot of women were burnt, being left-handed was enough to get you burnt as a witch, apparently. But I'm old, but I wasn't there at the time, actually, so I can't tell you.
Roger. You're muted, Roger.
Yeah, I'm muted now. Thank you very much, Angela. That was fascinating. My experience of left-handedness is a bit different from yours. I'm actually quite proficient with my right hand. As a teacher, I once found myself writing with my right hand on the blackboard, and it was not too bad. And I do, you know, for instance, if I hold a cricket bat or a golf club, as I didn't play golf, but I did play cricket. I'm a right-hander in that context, and I'm perfectly comfortable. In fact, I find it easier to use my right hand for cutting with scissors and so on. So I'm more ambidextrous than you are, but I am left-handed, and it certainly was a problem for writing. My writing was always messy, terribly messy, and I had a real savior when I came to GCEs, because my school, which was Bootham, the Quaker school, had a close association with Ampleforth, and our music master had learnt italic writing from his colleagues, a colleague at Ampleforth, and he taught all us. And I actually had a commendation for my writing, which was quite extraordinary. I wish I could do it now. It only works really well if you've got a good an appropriate chisel nib, and that got me through my exams. Otherwise, I would have been in a terrible mess. But I didn't really take off in writing until the computer came along, and I learned the word process, and it really does make a difference. As for families, none of my children were right. My brother was left-handed, but my sisters weren't. None of my children are left-handed, but my youngest son married a left-hander, and both their sons were left-handed. So it's quite a powerful genetic inheritance. Though I gather that I'm a biologist, but I haven't ever looked closely at the genetics of left-handedness, but it does seem to be pretty uncertain. It's a bit complicated. I hadn't heard the identical twin explanation. That's quite interesting. But it would be fascinating if somebody actually got to the bottom of it. But I mean, I think the point is that it does vary a bit. And I you know, the fact that I get on quite well with my right hand is useful. I'm very happy with the mouse in my right hand. I couldn't imagine doing it in my left, and so on. But the going into those countries where there's a cultural question of whether you use your right hand or your left hand is a bit of a minefield. I remember I travelled in Indonesia, and it worried me quite a lot because I read Culture Shock before I went, and but I didn't get into trouble, but I might have upset people. I don't know. But then I tend to eat with my right hand anyway. My natural eating hand is my right hand.
When I started to go to China, the one thing we were told when we had our induction was learn to use chopsticks. Do not use a spoon, you will lose face. And of course, my question was, is it okay in my left hand? And I've got a photo of myself somewhere with using chopsticks, but in my left hand. I'm very competent. I can pick up a grain of rice with chopsticks. Wow. So there is, different countries have different prejudices.
Indeed, they do indeed. Yeah.
I had an uncle who used to tell me of his times at school, which he really hated because he was of the left-hand variety. And when he wrote or tried to write with his left hand, the teacher would hit his hand with a ruler. And every time seen doing this, he got his hand hit. And so he struggled with his right hand. And obviously his writing was terrible, you know, and it was nearly illegible. And he said he left school, you know, he never wanted to go back again, you know, because he left school quite early, you know, and went into a trade. But, you know, this was, you know, he said, you know, if they'd done it nowadays, he said, you know, the teacher would probably be taken to whoever for child abuse nearly for that, if that would happen nowadays. But, you know, the kind of early in his life, you know, that happened, you know, it was 19th century, basically. But we've come a long way since then, hopefully. Mary.
My adoptive father was left-handed, and, you know, that's only one generation previously. And he was forced to write with his right hand, and it resulted in his stammering. So that's not long ago.
Marion.
That theory was prevalent when I was in the sixth form. I at school from about the age of 9 or so, I stammered really badly, and sort of suddenly all the people in the biology group rounded on me and said, "Were you ever left-handed and made to use your right hand?" So I said, "Well, I don't think so." But that obviously sort of, you know, when I was, you know, about 17, that was the theory that was being you know, I don't know what to say, promoted. So that's interesting. That kind of ties up with what you were saying, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
David.
Yeah, we're all learning. Just on a historic point from when you started, Angela, moving down to Kent wasn't necessarily the safe and easy option.
No, quite.
I was when you said that. So I was born in Kent, and it was called Hellfire Corner, because that's where the Battle of Britain was fought over. And
Absolutely.
my father was in a protected profession as a pharmacist, and he was out as an ARP warden. And he came home one night with a piece of flax stuck through his tin helmet, you know, which had failed to penetrate his brain. So it was definitely not the safe place.
No, but my mum was a Kent girl.
Yeah.
You know, so it was either Collier's Wood or Kent.
Yeah.
Christopher.
Yes. I find that fascinating because I'm right-handed generally. But one thing I have discovered, and I think it's the same with one of my sisters, is that to use a mouse on a computer, I have to use my left hand. I can't use, the right
Really?
hand is useless for it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mary? You're muted, Mary.
Sorry. Angela, did you have any problem with movement? In other words, going the wrong direction in school when you were having to dance and things of that sort?
Oh, I think when I learnt to drive, no, I can't remember that. I know, well, I do remember something. When we lived in Bromley Green Road, of course, all the road signs had been turned round to deceive the Germans. And my sister and I always knew. And when we got married, and with, explaining to our then husbands which way, no, you turn left here. And of course, the signpost said you turned right. And of course, they would turn right. And we would sort of look at each other and think, we do know. We were here in the war. All the signs were turned round to confuse the Germans. They are still confusing you.
Actually, Roger, I remember almost quarrelling between my husband because in folding sailing sheets, he would fold them in a different way.
Yeah. Yes, I've had I've had to be taught to coil a rope in the right direction because I do it with the wrong hand. But one of my skipper friends said, no, that's against the rope, the lie of the rope. You've got to do it the other way around. And I now know that I've got to do it backwards like this. But it's indeed. While I'm on my feet, as it were, Angela, where did you teach in London?
I was a head teacher at Gayhurst Infant School, Hackney. It was an infant. My grandson lives near there, and my daughter went running and sent me a picture of Gayhurst Infants because it's a London School Board building.
Yeah,
built 1870. No, it was about 1890 when London had a huge house building. School building program for primary schools following the 1870 Education Act. So, and we had a major fire in my school, and I was absolutely determined that the green tiles that were in every classroom would be painted white or cream. And my staff used to tease me. I said, Angela, are you sure you didn't start that fire? Because the school is so much better now than it was.
Yeah, because I asked because I worked in Ilya for 5 years.
Oh, did you? Where did you work? Which division?
I was divisional inspector in Wandsworth, almost the opposite.
Oh, really? Yeah. Foreign country for Hackney.
Very different. In fact, I can't resist this anecdote. We had an inspectors meeting in Black Horse Road in just on the South Bank, and at the end of the meeting, one of my colleagues said, "Can somebody give me a lift back to London?"
Well, I used to have to go
pleased.
I used to have to go under the Blackwall Tunnel every day to get to work, and if I didn't get to to school by 7 o'clock, then it would take me 2 hours more, and really I had to wait till about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, and the reason I came to work at Bristol Polytechnic was partly because I was working 90 hours a week, and it was it was not good.
Yeah, I had the same problem when I was working in London because I lived in Bristol and I commuted weekly to Wandsworth and then to Harrow. And the same, I reckoned if I could get to the office by 8 o'clock in the morning, I'd be okay. But that was West London. Harrow was not quite easy.
But the chemist who I can't resist this. The chemist who lived in Number 10 and destroyed the ILEA has a lot to answer for, in my opinion.
Yes. The other point was about the point that David raised about living in Kent. I was born in Orpington, and my mother was
I lived in Sidcup.
Right. I worked at Queen Mary Hospital during my national service.
Oh wow, really?
Yep. But my mother was determined not to evacuate until she saw the chaps coming back from Dunkirk, and she felt then that as a mother of a toddler, by then I was no, not a toddler. I was I was nearly 2 at Dunkirk. And she decided that we were going to live in the Lake District for 18 months. And that's an interesting history, which I won't go into now. But it did, of course, mean later that there was a bit of disruption in my early education. Not too much. I was at primary school during the Doodlebugs and the Rockets. I remember we lived in that area.
I shall
off the subject. Sorry.
I shall slightly leap in here and hint to my colleague Patsy that perhaps at a later date we should invite said person for lives and early times of Roger of the Sturge.
Yeah. Well, some interesting experiences. Happily. Now I'll shut.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Never been known to not to shut up, as my brothers and sisters would probably affirm to. I am like that. But there you go. Anyway, back to being of the left or the right type of thing. Any more questions and comments for Angela?
Yes, I think life was difficult for left-handers. Yeah, we had to overcome problems you never even came up against.
Well, happily, I think we are a little more. Christopher.
Yes, it's something that I've wondered about, because a friend of mine had a left-handed son, and she said she couldn't work out how to teach him to iron. And I said, well, surely if he just goes around the other side of the ironing board, he can do it then, if you see what I mean, because, but I'm not sure if I was right.
I think if the cord comes out the middle of the iron, but for most irons, the cord comes out the left side, and you just turn yourself in knots. You almost get the iron wrapped around you or wrapped around your arm. So it's looking at the design of the iron, maybe.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Thank
Hattie.
you.
You're muted, Hattie. Better.
It's nice that some irons are now made with the cord, so you can flip it one way or the other way. But what I was going to observe is in this group, seems to be quite a high percentage of left-handers. I know we're a small group and it's totally difficult, but you know.
Hattie, can you give us some medical explanation, please, quickly?
No, I know nothing about it. Not what we were taught about.
Can everybody who's left-handed put up their hands? Five out of.
That's a percentage of the group. That would be quite.
Well, we were wanting to find out why I'm left-handed and you're not.
I also wondered whether we have any evidence as to, you know, does left-handedness tend to come down from the mother or the mother's line of inheritance or the father's? Do we have are there any clues there? Do we know?
I've no idea who was left-handed in my ancestry, because of course in those days, as we've heard, people got made to write with their right hands anyway. I sometimes wonder if my father's atrocious writing was because he was really left-handed. I don't know. But, I'm not quite sure who my ex-daughter-in-law's, whether her parents were left-handed. I can't remember. I don't think her mother might have been.
Has Hattie left us?
No, she's still there.
I'm here.
David, you put your hand up just then.
Well, yeah, as a chemist, I don't think there's it's quite unlikely that there's going to be a sort of majority or an even balance in chemistry. There are many examples of, well, almost all organic chemicals exist in right-hand and left-handed forms, but our body chemistry, there aren't people with hearts on the other side.
There are.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry, but not in the same quantity. It's not. I don't think it's as common, and certainly a lot of the chemicals that are in our body, dextrose, that's a right-handed sugar, and so nature had to sort of pick and choose, and there's no obvious reason why something should be left-handed or right-handed, why evolution shouldn't have picked the mirror image all the way through, but then we would have ended up with probably 10% right-handed, and it doesn't automatically follow that because one particular, they're called isomers in chemistry, where something is chemically the same thing but geometrically a different shape, a left or a right hand mirror image version. So it happens far more. Left hand and right hand is simply the most obvious version of this, and in many cases there is an evolutionary advantage to having a proportion of difference, because once in a while that difference confers an advantage for survival, and so we progress through some kind of crisis, and a different balance emerges. But so this gets explained in different ways all over the place, not just in handedness.
Oh yeah, I mean, a very good example of that is sickle cell anemia, which protects against malaria.
Yeah.
So that's why it's more common in people from an African background that the gene for sickle cell anemia flourished because it gave protection against malaria. And there's a very interesting thing on the radio just this last day. Multiple sclerosis is more common in Northern Europe than Southern Europe, and they reckon that that's because the gene that causes it gave protection against diseases caught from cattle and sheep. That's the theory. So our origins in Central Asia are the cause of that, which is a very good example of what I used to, as a biologist, I used to know the technical term for this, but I can't remember what it is. Anyway, balanced polymorphism or something.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, then, friends. Now, next week, we have got something quite topical for you all. This is David Mowat, and David has titled his piece, Peace, Work and Justice in the Context of Gaza.
Right.
Indeed.
Most interesting. And And I hope we can say that we'll have as many this time tomorrow, next Friday, as we've had this Friday, because I'm very pleased to see that. But I see Hattie has her hand, so Hattie, do continue.
It's just I looked up left-handedness, and I looked under Wikipedia because it's quite to me, it's a good source of information. And they say it's, there are plenty of theories about left-handedness, and it's thought to be epigenetic. So it's genetics, biology, environment, etc. It's beyond genetics. It's not only genetic. And there you go. Slightly fewer in women than in men, but around, as Angela said, around 10%.
Did it say anything about the an association with the different characteristics of right and left brain?
I didn't look that up.
But I mean, I understand that there is an association there, but which says something funny about people like me who are sort of a bit ambidextrous. I must have mixed up brain. Explains a lot.
Well, I think mostly when people have sort of mixed up things like that, they're sort of above averagely creative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I've been.
Thank you very much. I'll stick with that one.
I've been looking into it. This is totally off topic, but I've been looking into some of that because my grandson has at last been diagnosed with dyslexia. The year after he failed all his exams when he could have had extra time, and all the time he's just felt he was stupid. And so I've been trying to kind of fish up everything that I can ever hear about dyslexic people and what they've done, and all the famous people and so on, to encourage him. But it does seem, when you kind of, there's a interesting website that I came across called Made by Dyslexia. It lists all people who've, well-known figures like Richard Branson and so on and so forth, because it's still something that people feel that they don't do well at school, and they end up thinking of themselves as stupid and useless.
I was working in education that was still regarded as middle class fad. And it's taken longer to recognize it than it took to recognize that left-handedness was not something that you tried to drum out of people. We do move on sometimes,
and even longer to stop regarding it as just a disability.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's very creative,
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yes, I am dyslexic and have known this for quite a number of years now, but it has, I think, dyslexics are more creative because they've had to be. If you can't do, if you're told quite often, as I was when I was growing up, that you're just lazy, you're just stupid, you're just, you could do it if you wanted to, and it's just something. There's teachers saying such things, which made me a little cross later on in life. But yeah, it's something which still is needs a lot more research into, because it's as you were saying, Marion, that there's lots of different people within their creative field who approved that you are more than the sum of your parts type of thing, and I applaud them enormously, and hope that your grandson will achieve what he wants to, even though he has been nearly sat upon, I suppose, in a sense, that we should all achieve what we can, You know, I got to university, so I count myself rather blessed in that sense, you know, that I had the sort of people behind me that pushed me into doing things which I was a little reluctant to do. But, you know, I achieved it and went on to work in a job I loved. And so there you go.
I know we're over time, but would people like me to tell a little anecdote which sort of shows the creativity, but also a bit of Quaker networking?
Do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was working as an art therapist. I was referred to somebody who was supposedly suffering from depression, a young man who liked art. And he came along for his first session and he said, "Can I bring my bike into the art room?" My art room was pretty small, but he was very insistent. And I said, "What's special about your bike? Why can't you tie it up outside?" He said, "I built it." And I said, "You built it?" And he said, "Yeah, it's easy." So he couldn't read and write, but he could build a bike. Anyway, I sort of soon, because I knew that Phoebe was head of adult basic skills at Ashley Down, as it then was, I sort of shipped him off there, and he came back sort of 2 weeks later with folders under his arm saying, "I'm a student now." He didn't really have a mental health problem at all. What had happened was that he'd been in care all his life, his young life, and he finally got a flat, and he didn't understand the bills that would, you know, and so he was wound up in tears on social services doorstep. And that was the problem. He couldn't read because he was dyslexic. And so the health service duly pronounced a sort of diagnosis. Well, that was one thing. Okay, so I'm dyslexic. But then what? Well, the health service had nothing to say, but fortunately, with Phoebe just down the road or just up the road, he was sorted. Okay, if I didn't take too long over that.
Oh, lovely, thank you.
Well, I think that, thank you, Angela. It has been a subject which we've all contributed, I think, to the, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you.